At first, everything was fine. I had escaped Earth with an alien, and still, I had no regrets. The days on the ship blurred together, a routine, monotonous, yes, but peaceful. Lyra and I shared the same small space, the same simple routine, checking systems, preparing synthetic meals, sleeping together in that tiny cabin. No rush, no threats, no clear future, but also no chains. We didn't talk much. We didn't need to. Sometimes, a look was enough, a small gesture. We had left everything behind. My farm, her world, our old lives. And for a time, I couldn't say exactly how long, I convinced myself of the lie, that it was enough. There were moments when I thought, we weren't that different, like when Lyra corrected me, patiently, at the ship's controls, or when she laughed, a barely audible laugh, more like a vibration in the air than an actual sound. When I got frustrated with tech I didn't understand, or when I fell asleep, listening to her breath, slow, precise, like an alien metronome, marking a rhythm my heart had already grown used to. Weeks passed, maybe months, in an imperfect but real calm. No danger, no secrets. Or so I wanted to believe. Because I wasn't a hero. I wasn't an explorer. I wasn't a warrior. I was just a farmer. A farmer who had leapt into the void, chasing something he didn't even know how to name. And there I was, out among the stars, with a creature I should never have loved. And yet, I did. The universe could have ended out there, and I wouldn't have even noticed. It was Lyra who began to change first. Small things. She took longer to answer when I called her. She spent hours staring at the stars, unmoving. She murmured words, in her language, when she thought I was asleep. Little details. Little cracks. Nothing that alarmed me right away. Not then. Landing on Nova was the last big decision we made together. And also, the first that began to break everything apart. I was never good at reading signs. That's why. It took me a while to realize that something was wrong. The ship took us to Nova on a journey that lasted 6 Earth days. Or at least, that's what I believed. There was no real way to measure time and space. Only the monotonous flicker of lights, the constant hum of the engines, the sound of our own bodies trying to adapt to something we didn't understand. Nova was no paradise. It was a planet of metallic skies, of red seas, of mountains that looked like rusted blades stabbing into the horizon. No cities, no civilization, just ruins, ancient, covered in lichens that glowed in the dark. Lyra said it was a forgotten place. Sure, but forgotten. By who? I didn't ask. Not then. I was too stupid, too blinded by the idea of a new beginning. We built a shelter with the little we had. Wreckage from the ship, local materials, which Lyra molded as if they were soft clay. I did the heavy lifting, and I didn't care. My hands were busy, and my head, loud with noise. The first days, we worked as a team. We understood each other, without speaking. Just like on the farm. But there were new things too. Small details that hadn't been there before. Lyra started to pull away. She disappeared for hours, said she was gathering resources, mapping the area. Sometimes she came back, with scratches, with black dust on her clothes. I didn't ask. I didn't ask. Until one day, she came back, without her communicator. The bracelet she used to translate her language was gone. She said it had broken, that we didn't need it anymore, that now she understood me directly. But it wasn't true. Sometimes she'd say words in her native tongue, fast, whispered, like prayers. She didn't want me to understand them. She didn't want me to know what she was really thinking. I pretended not to notice anything, but each night I fell asleep a little later. And each night, I trusted her a little less. I don't remember exactly when I started hearing the voices. At first, it was just a hum, like wind slipping through cracks that didn't exist. Then came words, voices that weren't Lyra's and weren't mine. Whispers in a language I didn't know, but that made my skin crawl. One night, I jolted awake. There was no wind, nothing at all, just the voice, and Lyra wasn't in the shelter. I stepped outside. Nova's ground crunched under my boots, as if I were walking on dry bones. I saw her, in the distance, standing before a circle of stones, alone, or so, I thought. I hid behind a large rock, breathing through my mouth to stay silent. Lyra was speaking, not to me, not to anyone. I could see. Her words floated in the air, like blades, a language I couldn't understand, but heavy with purpose, a plea, a negotiation. And then, something answered. I didn't see it, but I felt it. The ground trembled, slightly, like the rumble of something massive, moving underground. Lyra dropped to her knees. Who kneels before nothing? I swallowed the fear, like it was gasoline. I stepped back, a loose stone, a tiny crunch. Lyra turned, instantly. Her eyes found me in the dark, but they weren't her eyes. Not entirely. Something shimmered inside them, something that wasn't human, nor Nixian, nor anything I could name. I ran. I ran back to the shelter, without looking back. When Lyra returned, hours later, she acted like nothing had happened, as if she hadn't seen me, as if we weren't sinking, together, into something we didn't understand. 3 days passed, or what I guessed, were 3 days. Nova's sky never changed, always that filthy, gray, like a rotting corpse. No sunrises, no nights, just a dying, perpetual light. Lyra was different, colder, more distant. Sometimes I'd find her standing by the window, still, as if she were listening to something I couldn't hear. Other times, when she thought I wasn't watching, she stared at her hands, turned them slowly, as if she didn't recognize them. One morning, I woke up alone. Lyra was gone. So was her clothing, her tools, and on the ship. I ran out, my heart pounding in my temples. I followed the footprints. Nova was an open grave, but the dust kept our tracks. The prints led to the ruins. I arrived, gasping, and I saw her. The ship was there, perched atop an ancient structure. That looked like an altar. Lyra was working the controls, frantically. It wasn't a takeoff, it was something else. Something worse. Columns of black smoke were rising from the ground. Thick, twisted shapes. Things that shouldn't exist. Shadows of things that once were alive, but no longer were. She wasn't alone. Around her, those things were closing in, crawling, muttering sounds that didn't belong in any living throat. I wanted to scream at her, but no sound came out. One of those beings, a shapeless mass, drooling, with scraps of old armor fused to its flesh, turned toward me and spoke with the voice of my dead father. "Tom, come with us." Tom. I ran, like I had never run in my life. I don't know how far I ran. I could feel the blood burning in my throat, my legs ready to snap. Nova's air was thick, sticky. Every breath was like swallowing ashes. When I stopped, I could no longer see the shelter or the ruins, only rust-colored rocks and dry rivers. I collapsed behind a jagged rock formation, my chest heaving uncontrollably, my hands trembling. I thought about staying there until I died. It seemed like a reasonable choice until I heard the hum, the ship. I opened my eyes. I saw it, flying low over the horizon, searching for something, searching for me. Lyra was piloting. I knew it. She had brought me to this cursed planet. She had opened something in those ruins. I didn't know if it was an accident, or a betrayal, or a planned sacrifice. And in that moment, I no longer cared. I only knew. I had to get away from her. I ran toward the mountains. The terrain was unstable, slippery. The living rock pulsed beneath my feet, as if the entire planet were sick, as if it wanted to spit me out. I slipped more than once. I tore open my palms. I scraped my knees. I didn't stop. I reached a cave, barely, a crack between the rocks. I slipped inside without thinking. Inside, it smelled of old iron, of rot. The passage sloped downward. I kept going, more out of momentum than choice. Each step, darker, wetter, more alien. At the bottom, I found something I didn't expect. Not ruins, not technology. A body. It was human, or had been. Its corpse was already mummified. Long ago. I don't know how long. On the ground, next to it, there was an old badge. Project Orion, an Earth exploration mission, lost decades ago. In its dead hand, a primitive transmitter. I took it, turned it on. A recording crackled through static and distortion. Don't trust them. They're not what they claim to be. They're tools. They open doors, but they never close. The message, cut off. With a dry snap, I stayed there, in the darkness, feeling like the entire universe had shrunk, just enough to crush me. I wasn't the first human to reach Nova, and, judging by the way he met his end, I wouldn't be the last. I don't know how far I ran. I could feel the blood burning in my throat, my legs ready to snap. Nova's air was thick, sticky. Every breath felt like swallowing ashes. When I stopped, I could no longer see the shelter or the ruins, only rust-colored rocks and dry rivers. I collapsed behind a jagged, shattered rock formation. My chest rising and falling, out of control. My hands were trembling. I thought about staying there until I died. It seemed like a reasonable option, until I heard the hum, the ship. I opened my eyes. I saw it, flying across the horizon, looking for something, looking for me. Lyra was piloting. I knew it. She had brought me to this cursed planet. She had opened something in those ruins. I didn't know if it had been an accident, a betrayal, or a planned sacrifice. And at that moment, I didn't care anymore. I only knew that I had to get away from her.